Hello everyone and welcome to this week's episode, number 181 I believe, of the Ratliff Mandolins weekly production diary. And if you're following the series, you already know that I'm building a batch of 10 mandolins. And the subject of this week's video is going to be mandolins number 2 and mandolin number 7. These are the only two master models in this batch, and master models get 3-ply binding all over and inlay and just all sorts of fancy stuff that the country boys don't get. And so it is time to do the binding and the inlay on the peg heads of these two mandolins. And so we're going to concentrate mainly on mandolin number 2, and the reason is mandolin number 2 has or will have the standard R5 master model peghead inlay. Mandolin number 7 here is just going to have a little bit simpler design here. The customer would like to have an elongated diamond put in, so this one's going to be just a tad simpler and not standard, but mandolin number 2 will have the standard inlay pattern. So we're going to concentrate mainly on mandolin number 2, and we're going to put the binding on, and then we're going to put the inlay in, and we're going to go through all of the steps that it takes to do that. So let's get started. First, let's examine the fixture that we're going to use to hold this mandolin in a good position so that we can work on it. This thing fits, of course, into my double row lockdown jig. It started life as a 2x8, and certain shape sawn into it so that a mandolin will fit on there. This has been hollowed out to kind of hold the neck, and it's been padded out really good with leather. And this piece right here is really an over exaggeration of the arch in a mandolin, so that the mandolin, as it's loaded into the fixture, will only touch here and here. It also is padded out with leather real good. So we have 3 contact points for the mandolin, and it'll sit right there. Now this whole mess back here is just a funny shaped thing that will kind of cut the mandolin like this with a slide and a lock handle, so that we can load the mandolin here, push this way, lock it down. It's padded with leather as well, and the mandolin will sit there and pretty much not go anywhere. But as an added safety feature, I also have a piece of angle iron here on both sides of this fixture with slots cut in it, and this right here, which is a piece of bent 1/4-inch rod with these handles on threaded handles, and a shoe, just a wooden shoe, and that'll go just like that right there. Lock in on both sides in those slots in that angle iron, tighten it down, and that mandolin is not going to go anywhere. I can work on the top, the F-holes pretty easily, and I can also work on the peg head itself very easily, and that's the jig that we're going to use to do all this work. Now I have the mandolin in this jig. It's all locked down, and let me explain to you what we've got. We have a maple neck with a walnut overlay. The overlay is 65 or 70 thousandths thick, more like 70, I think. And it's all been shaped to fit the underlying maple. We are going to put binding all around this peg head, just exactly like what you're seeing. It'll just be a continuation of this binding on the fingerboard. It'll be a thicker outer white with a black stripe, and then an inner thin stripe of white is going to go right there, and it will go, the slot that we're going to cut for this binding will go all the way through this overlay material. So we're going to have to cut a channel out right here that's 70 thousandths deep until we hit the maple, the underlying maple. And we're going to do that with a router and some hand tools and some marking gauges and that sort of thing. So let me show you those tools. Now I have two purfling tools that I use. This one is a homemade one. I've made it early on when I first started building mandolins. It has a knife blade in there, a slot, a couple of set screws to adjust the distance of the knife blade from that arm right there. And then this one is a store-bought one that I bought last year that does basically the same job. So we'll be using those to mark the distance in on the overlay. Let me show you. What we're going to do is cut a ledge, like I said earlier, all the way down through that walnut till we hit the maple, and we're going to mark where that inner edge should be, and we'll use one of these tools, either this one or this one, to score that line to let us know how far in this way we need to go. I already know how far we're going to go down. Now we need to know how far we're going to go in, and we use these as marking tools. And then I have a DeWalt laminate trimmer with a 1/16 inch router bit put in it, and that's what will do most of the bulk removal of the walnut for the binding channel, and what we'll use to cut most of the recesses for the pearl inlay as well. This tool, we'll use this tool. And then the rest of it will be done with small hand tools, much like X-Acto knives and smaller utility craft chisel kind of things. And that's what we'll be using to do all the fine handwork. I have a sealer coat of plain old super glue over top of this walnut. It's very porous, and I'm going to take some very fine paper, probably 320 or 400, and just kind of slick that off. And take these tools right here and set the depth on these to be the same width as the binding, and scratch all around here and make a mark so that I can see how deep we want that line to go. And where I cannot get these tools in, I'm just going to take a pencil and freehand a line through there, and then probably score that with a razor knife. I think with this shot you'll be able to see the scratch lines and the penciled on marks. I have taken a razor knife and just really reinforced and deepened those scratch lines around the pencil lines. I've scored that really good. So I've got some good strong score lines exactly where I want the inside of that channel to be. And now I'm going to tackle it with this router that has a 1/16 inch bit on it and hog out as much of that waste as I can possibly get to, being very careful not to come inside the lines. I just want to stay outside of the lines, and we'll trim it all up later with hand tools. As you can see, the channel looks pretty shaggy right at the moment. It's all cut, but don't worry about that. We'll clean it all up with the hand tools. Now I'm finished with the peg head using the router and then the hand tools. I have cleaned off the walnut until I am down to the level of the maple, and it's time to start the binding job itself. So let me tell you about that. Now, for each segment that gets bound, we're actually going to use 2 pieces of binding. We're going to have a black, white, black strip on the inside. Hope you can see that. And then we're going to have a large white strip on the outside, just like we did on the body. Now, to do that, this will be cut. This smaller piece will be cut and shaped and glued in. And then we'll start with these things. These are pieces of this wide stuff that's been bent and put into these holder molds, and then I usually just split those down the middle, clean them up, sand them flat and everything, and for each bend I get two pieces, so I can do two peg heads with that piece, and that piece is the one that goes on the inside of the scroll. Then we'll fit this in that slot and then glue our piece in. Get this down here, and that will be the effect, and that's how that works. Here's sort of a little trial run so you can see the overall effect. You see, once everything is bent and shaped in there together, we'll have the wide outside white and the inner black ring, and then a inner white ring for a 3-ply effect. And just while we're here, this is the first piece that I always do when I'm doing peg heads. And the reason being, I have a certain order of things that I like to do, and that is get this piece on, and then I only have to make one joint here, pull this piece all the way down, then I only have to make one joint here and pull that piece all the way down. Now this is a rough one because you have to make two joints, this one in here and this one right here. So usually I will start going from here, bring this around here, and this is the hardest piece to mate because you have to get two joints correct, and so you have to get the piece the exact length and everything. And then this one I can just make the joint here, let this hang out, cut, trim, make the joint here, let this hang out, cut, trim here, and then this, you got plenty of room here to just cut for the nut. So this is my order of how I put the pieces on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And of course this will be a little more complicated because it's 3-ply. So I'm going to put the white black in first, so that'll be 7 pieces, and then I'll have to go back and do the white, which will be 7 more pieces. So anytime you do 3-ply binding using the method that I use, it's twice as much work. Now for those of you who are longtime followers of this series, you know that I bend this binding into the shape that I need it to be in so that I can glue it on the peg head by using a regular toaster. And so I'm going to shoot some shots of me just putting the binding on here, and just whenever I see something that seems to be worthy of a good shot, I'll take it, and you can follow me along as I put the binding on this peg head. I now have the second piece of inner black, white, black binding glued onto the peg head of mandolin number 2, and I'm going to hang it on the wall, and while it dries, I'm going to work on mandolin number 7, doing the same job. And that's basically what my next little bit of workflow is going to look like. I'm just going to bounce back and forth between mandolin number 7 and mandolin number 2. I now have the last piece of black, white, black inner binding on mandolin number 2, and I've got the first 3 pieces of that same black, white, black inner binding glued on mandolin number 7, and it is time to let those cure for a minute before I go back and do the round again. And while that is curing, I am going to put the frets in mandolin number 1. Mandolin number 1 has all of the frets put in, and like I mentioned before, mandolin number 2 here has all of the interior binding wrapped on. Now I'm going to take this tool right here. There's a close-up. It's a little, basically a little square chisel that I have cut, believe it or not, out and ground out of a chainsaw file, and I'm going to use this one as a scraper to clean this channel of any excess glue and get a nice sharp inside corner in there for the white outer binding. So let me turn off the camera and do the scraping, and then we'll come back and glue that first piece of white binding on. And now the ledge to glue that outside white piece is all clean and ready to accept that outside white piece. And I will start with the same order that I did the interior black, white, black strip. We'll start with this piece being number 1, this piece number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6, and number 7 in that order. So let me get this piece ready and glue it on. The second piece of outside white binding is glued on mandolin number 2. And there, the fourth piece of binding goes on mandolin number 2. Here's a shot of the fifth and the sixth piece being glued on. And the final piece of the white outer binding on mandolin number 2. Here's a shot of it being glued on. Now I have taken all the string off and cleaned off the excess glue and everything. And here's a couple of close-up shots of the final product, the binding on the peghead of mandolin number 2. So by the end of the week, the list of accomplishments that got taken care of are all of the binding is on the peghead of mandolin number 7 now. It's ready for its inlay job. I've also got frets on mandolin number 1 and frets on mandolin number 3. And of course, mandolin number 2 has all of the peghead binding put on as well. And I got the first piece of inlay put in the peghead, but I decided that I am going to close this video off here and then feature the inlay job on mandolin number 2 as the main focus of next week's video. So I certainly hope that you'll come back next week when we do that job on the next episode of the Ratliff Mandolins Weekly Production Diary, and we'll look for you then.